Well, good morning, community. Welcome to Stroke of Genius podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Alva. In today's show, I'm going to meet I've been a stroke survivor that you're going to want to hear from me. I can't wait to introduce to him. His name is Liam, and we're going to be sharing a story. So let's get right into it.
The Stroke of Genius podcast, hosted by brain aneurysm and stroke survivor Aaron Avila, sharing the experiences of survivors and CEOs. This is your destination for inspiration.
Well, good morning, Liam.
Well, good morning, Aaron.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we only have 30 minutes together, so let's just jump right into it.
Sure.
I'm gonna be trying. There's some really exciting news. I'm so excited for you. I can't wait for the audience to find out about it. But let's start by asking. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Liam Bernard, and I am a survivor of a massive stroke that I had 4.5 years ago. I live in Owensboro, Kentucky. And I recently wrote a book about my stroke experience.
Yeah, we're gonna put a link for that book, which is it's called the Stroke Survivor one.
It's called A Stroke Survivor's Tale, a
That's
survivor and caregiver's resource guide.
Yeah, okay. So we're gonna get more into that and find out more about the book later in the show. But let's hear about your story and your stroke survivor.
Well,
Please,
sure. It was
please
on
describe
January
your life.
12th, 2018. I was home that morning with my wife, and I'd had a terrible case of bronchitis, and I'd been up most of the night coughing. And I went outside to scrape, snow off my car because it was the only snow day we'd had that year. Because I needed to go get some cough syrup for my bronchitis. And when I came in from scraping the snow off my windshield, I looked at my wife and I told her, I said, my left leg feels a little numb. And I just thought it was from being out in the cold. I didn't think anything of it. And I went into our den and I sat down, and my wife came walking by a little later, and she knows I was sitting on the floor drinking my coffee instead of on the couch. And fortunately, my wife knew, knows all the early warning signs of stroke, and she asked me to smile, and of course I could not. She asked me to lift both my arms, and I couldn't. I could lift one, and she immediately went to the phone, and I said, no, I'm not having a heart attack. I knew I wasn't having a heart attack because there was no pain. And like an idiot, Aaron, I looked at her and said, I'm not having a stroke either. I was an idiot. I was at the onset of a massive stroke. Because of her quick action, I was in the emergency room and was able to receive TPA within probably 30 to 45 minutes of the onset of my stroke.
Wow.
And the neurosurgeon the neurosurgeon and the neurologist that were there concluded that my stroke was caused by coughing. I had coughed so much and so violently that I dislodged a piece of plaque in my artery that had shot into my brain and caused the stroke. Because prior to my stroke, I was basically very healthy and really not. I didn't have any of the warning signs or any of the risk factors for a stroke. But they started telling us in the emergency room that I would probably never walk again, which has turned out not to be true. I walk. It's not as smoothly and as easily as I did before my stroke, but I can walk anywhere I need to go.
Your wife saved your life, bro.
She really did.
I mean, it's so common, Liam, that everybody on my show, I mean, I'm going to say 99.9% of my survivor guests, well, all of them, 100%, all say I was an average. They deny it. They deny the obvious. There's
Well, to
something,
me, I had no experience with stroke at all. So for me, it was not obvious. I mean, I was clueless. I mean, the reality of that I was having a stroke did not really hit me until I was coming out of the MRI in the emergency room.
that's when you knew it was to have a
That's
stroke.
when it hit me. I thought, oh God, this is a real stroke because I was unable to move anything on the left side of my body.
Yeah, you know it's amazing, and I don't think it is. I think there's two parts of that denial. Is that number one, we're not educated in stroke. If I had my way, stroke TV media out our way, we'd make sure stroke was taught in every grade school in the United States. Period. And you're a teacher, you know,
Yes.
it should be taught. It should be taught at a very young age. That so when you start having those things occur, you don't deny it. But one, lack of knowledge. Two, there's something in the human psyche that doesn't allow to acknowledge terrible things are happening. I don't know what that is. But
Well,
that's
I'm
kind
so
of the
lucky she was here because if she had not been here, I probably would have just laid down to take a nap and the damage from the stroke would have just continued to spread. Because I just
yeah.
thought I was having a reaction to the cold from being outside.
Well, I don't know that you're so lucky you're administered the TPA. That is so I had a brain aneurysm, so I couldn't get it. But that TPA can make it to where you don't have the your short term is you have the symptoms of stroke. But the TPA seems to make the future easy to rebuild your abilities again.
Right. I remember vividly, when I was the conversation I had with the attending physician in the emergency room about the TPA. He told me about the TPA and he said, we can give you something that might help reverse some of the damage that you've had. And I said, what is it? And he explained what it was. But he said, there's a risk. He said that it can kill me. He said, you can have a brain bleed or a stomach bleed and die of either one. And I've met this particular ER doctor before, and we've had this conversation once before over something else. And I said, you know me, I'm a quality of life person. I'd want to take the risk. I said, give me the TPA. And so, in my state, in being in the midst of a stroke, they wouldn't take my word for it. So, they, of course, had to get, permission from my wife to do it at the time.
Yeah, okay. Well, Bryce Ben is a cousin. He's a audience member out there. He had the clot too, but it could be Mr. TPA because he had a blade. He had a
Mm,
brain blade. So couldn't do it.
right.
Similar to it's not an aneurysm, but it's where the walls of the veins get so thin the blood can travel through them and go into the brain.
Mm,
But yeah, you can't get TPA. But I can't help but now you mentioned that you were a teacher before,
yes.
and then you had the stroke. So what would you say is the most difficult thing to deal with this stroke? What is it?
For me, the most difficult thing to deal with was, well, two things really. One, being in a wheelchair. I mean, I was just miserable in the time, in the year and a half I was in the wheelchair. And two, it was the second thing is my brain or my mind felt that I could still do the things that I did prior to stroke, and I would try to do those things, and I, of course, could not do them as well. And that was a very frustrating disconnect for me.
You know, I
So I
want
just determined to keep my focus on
right.
recovery.
right. You have to stay relentless. You have to go for it. And
You really do.
I haven't walked for 12 years, Liam. I'm not getting up. I am going to walk someday as sure as anything. In fact, I have a dream of running over to live or not. I'm going to run over someday. Watch. Do it.
Right.
But, I think attitude is everything when it comes to. I don't think it's the ability to get that's the most important. It's the mindset.
You're absolutely right. I made a decision from the beginning that I would do whatever was necessary to rebuild my life, and it's been a slow process for these 4.5 years, but I've mostly been very successful in rebuilding my life. But I've never I've never wavered from that thought that I will get to the finish line.
Yeah, I want you survivors out there to hear that. Don't forget, we're running a race of speed. You can't compare Liam's recovery in 4 years to my recovery in 12. But I can do one thing. We can't all have one thing in common. We're all in the race as far as a marathon. We're trying to get to the finish line. And Liam, whenever anybody put it that way, that we just gotta keep our eyes on the prize, keep our eyes on the finish.
Right. And you're right, it is a marathon. But it's a
Right? It's
difficult
not.
marathon because we have no idea where the finish line really is. I mean, I've accomplished some phenomenal things in 4.5 years of my recovery, but I'm not to the finish line yet. I still believe that neuroplasticity over time will bring back some more movement in my left arm and hand, which are still heavily damaged from the stroke.
Yeah, but they say neuroplasticity never dies. It never stops. The human being, as long as they're alive, there's always a chance to rebuild and those abilities again. I'm not a big advocate, Liam, of the word recovery because I think you have to rebuild your life after stroke. You don't recover a stroke. I think the word recovery used in the medical field is really misleading and disheartening to most survivors because we all leave like we have a goal we're just gonna recover. Well, that's not true. You have to work so hard at it. And if you don't work at it, you're not gonna get your abilities back. You, you have to work at it.
Aaron, I am so glad you brought that up. That's something I bring up in my book that, recovery is not restoration. We're never going to be restored to how we were. We're not going to be restored to how we were yesterday, much less how we were prior to a stroke. Recovery is basically rebuilding our lives in a way that is satisfying to us.
Yeah, I do. Liam, I gotta mention in just a minute, but there are things in life. Your ability to move and function, be who you were. I just don't think it's something that I don't think the hospital should tell people recover. Because it almost makes them think they have a cold or fluid and just say, wake up, now strokes up happen. I love saying, why my draw I'll be back 3 months with my truck. Drive my truck. That's it. Well, it's been 12 years.
Well, you make a great point, Aaron.
Yeah. But let's take a minute. We're done about halfway mark, believe it or not. But let's talk about your book. Now, you're a genius.
No,
What
not at all. I'm
what
just very stubborn and very determined.
well, to me, that's a genius. Genius, I don't necessarily picture it being like Einstein, but your genius was your determination. You didn't let stroke stop you from life. In fact, you went on to write a book. Tell people about your book.
Well, after I was released from the rehab hospital, I came home and I started searching on Google for books, about stroke recovery. And at the time, 2018, I mean, since there's been plenty of things that seems to be coming out now. I mean, I looked on Amazon with my publisher last weekend. There's a lot of new stuff out there, but at the time there were very few things, and all they taught, and the ones that were there primarily spoke about physical recovery. You could find almost nothing that talks about the other parts of your recovery. I think much of your recovery has to do with your mentality and psychology and how you handle things and how you respond to things and the commitment you make to recovery. Additionally, I talk about practical things like, dealing with insurance companies, which is very important. If you understand your insurance policy, it makes planning and choosing your therapy options so much easier. For example, once I got down and started reading my insurance policy, it said you can have 30 annual visits to physical therapy, 30 for occupational, and 30 for speech. And then over time, they just changed that to a blanket 90 to use any way you want. And it saves a lot of stress if you understand these things. I also go into the importance of things like choosing your physical therapist and your occupational therapist and things you should consider in rebuilding your life, that you're going to run into lots of frustrations. I mean, there are going to be things, and I also discuss, the death anxiety that almost seems to be inevitable for most stroke survivors.
Now, I can't help but I mean, have you and I talked about the Bridging the Gap project so TV media is going to do? You know, talked about that.
I don't think so.
Well, you and I are very similar seeing the things of stroke. That
Right.
I saw there was a gap between hospital and home. And I wanted to develop a video series that sounded like you're perfect to help me lead it up. And I got Brain Aneurysm Foundation gonna sound like I'm gonna get involved in. But we're gonna create a video series from those spas all the way to the hospital's home. Because what do they basically kick us out of the hospital? And then say, okay, we'll see you later. Good luck in recovery. And they don't, it's like really help, but they don't help your wife, they don't help our significant other. Don't tell us what to expect. How do we rebuild? What do we do? What do we do now that we're home? You know what I mean?
Right. That was what I was trying to find answers to when I went looking on Google. What do I do now? I mean, my time with my physical and occupational therapist was limited, but there was a lot of time at home. What can I do? And I found, fortunately, um, so, I put together my own exercise routine. I literally sat there and wrote it out, and the things that I would do every single day to try to strengthen my leg and my arm, and the reading and things I would do to try to keep my brain active.
Well, you were a teacher, and I'm gonna drop it because I'm so proud of you what you've done. You were a
Thank you.
teacher 4 years ago. You so took you out to teaching, but let's announce the monumental, huge announcement. You're going back to teaching.
Yes, I found a wonderful school system and a wonderful school, which was a stroke of luck. I don't mean any, sorry for the bad choice of words, but yes, I've been back in the classroom now for 6 weeks and I love it. After my stroke, Aaron, I thought I would never be in the classroom again. I thought those things were over.
Yeah, I get it, man. I mean, I told you in the green room when you and I talked, and I would say almost. I mean, a majority of search for dreaming going back to the old job. And my attitude with teachers that are gifted. to have a passion, teach young people is so greater. Maybe you go back and now mention stroke and get them, mention to them about stroke or do quick little teaching on stroke. But I think the, I'm so excited to hear you go back to the same profession you were doing before, and I get that special. So I want to say congratulations, Liam. So give your school,
Well, thank you.
the new school you're at, give them a shout out. Good. Say
Oh,
hello.
yeah, I'm at Hancock County High School in Hawesville, Kentucky. It is a wonderful place, and I couldn't ask for better colleagues or a better principal. They're wonderful. And
That's
and
a
they're aware that
Hancock,
I'm a recovering stroke survivor.
and that's amazing. And I really encourage you, and you not that say something to your students. They need to know. So if it ever 1 in 4 people will have a stroke, and if they will remember, you mentioned, I guarantee you one time, I don't care if they're 50, 60 years old when it happens. You know, my puppy dead by then. But if they remember what you told them in the classroom, just a quick little lesson on it. On stroke. Here's what stroke is, here's the signs of stroke. It may save a life, Liam, and I appreciate it. If you do
And
that,
you're right.
I appreciate it. Maybe talk to your colleagues about it, see what they say, but I don't want to get sidetracked. You and I need to talk about getting you involved in the Bridging the Gap project for sure. Help me get it going because that's something that can change lives.
Sure.
But Liam, describe your life now. I mean, you've done. Give me a. I should do this because we're getting down that time. If you knew a stroke survivor just had a stroke, going into it, what type of advice would you give them?
It's a slow rebuilding process. It's like building a wall. Concentrate on it brick by brick. I mean, for me, it was one thing at a time, and then over time, I started to realize we've gone this far. Now this is possible. I mean, it's a long race. I mean, the key is see it as a marathon and do not give up. Resolve from the beginning to rebuild your life in a way that um, is good for you.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that because when I first had my stroke, you and I were talking about probably giving up. It was our life was over. But it's not true. We found out that's not true.
Mm.
But I do many stroke survivors have stroke. And like I said, put a period at the end. They say their life's over. They stop trying to get better. So I think you're right. You've got to have the mindset. I'm gonna keep going. I'm not gonna stop until
If I could
and
add one thing, Aaron, and I do mention this in my book a few times, the one thing that I get furious about that often these medical professionals will say to stroke survivors is they say this still that where you are after a year is where your recovery is going to stay. That is a load of BS. I mean, it took me a year and a half to get out of my wheelchair, and I was told I'd never walk. Um, I mean, I'm doing things that the first time I opened my hand was when I was in Dublin. I took my wife to Dublin, Ireland, and that was almost 2 years post stroke. But I mean, these are milestones that I remember. I mean, there's a lot of things that started happening after the 1 year mark for me. I couldn't lift this stroke affected arm for nearly 2 years, but now I can lift it. And I'm hoping from that will come, more fluid movement in the future.
I think like you and I said in the green room, say it on the show. Mindset is everything. When it comes to your stroke, the old saying, you can never fail if you don't stop trying. It's a marathon, stroke survivors. It's
Right.
not instant, and do not compare yourself. I cannot compare myself of getting a wheelchair in 2 years. Here, Liam, just say you got a wheelchair in 2 years. Well, I'm still in a wheelchair 12 years later. So don't compare your stroke to other strokes of art. Big mistake.
Right.
Right? Don't you agree?
I think when people hear that nonsense at where you are after a year, people give up. I think that's their cue to give up. They're like, well, the doctor said, well, as a friend of mine in the Netherlands says, doctors are not gods. I mean, they do miracles every day, but they're not gods. They don't know everything. They don't know truly what you're capable of. Only you know this.
Yes, I really, really want to, as we're coming down the end of the show, I want to really drive that point home because don't let people define you. Don't, especially doctors. I was told I would never speak. I would never talk.
Mm.
I host 2 podcasts a week. I'm running a corporate business. I'm a CEO of a corporation. I mean, they told me I never do anything. Don't let people define you. That's dirty about it.
I couldn't have worded it any better than you did, Aaron. Don't let anyone define you.
Well, I think it's for now. Your book, well, you said your book also helps caregiver. Tell me a little more about your book going out, would you please?
Well, it'll be available on Amazon, I think, beginning Saturday.
And then refresh our memory? What's the name of it?
Oh, it's a stroke survivor's tale. I use my experience and the frustrations I went through in recovery and try to give helpful advice and resources to survivors and caregivers because caregivers play such an important role in this. And I hope that it'll prove to be helpful to other people that are going through the same struggle that you and I have gone through.
Yeah, just hearing Liam. I mean, and if you're watching this on the replay, one, if you like this content, you like the Circle Genius podcast, it stands for. Please subscribe to our Stroke TV Media YouTube channel. But and we're gonna we do shows every Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for people. Liam, I'm so excited to hear about your book. I really want to help. Like when it launches, let me know. We'll do a special launch party, and we'll run a launch party. And maybe you can offer to sign some books or whatever. But when your book launches, Stroke TV Media, Stroke of Genius podcast want to help you get your word out there because your book is essential and it's right in line with Bridging the Gap. So let me know when it comes out.
I certainly will, and thank you for the generosity. And I'll sign anything you want.
Yeah,
I'll sign all the books you want.
I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be fun. Well, then we're down the last couple of minutes. Here's a shout out to Burr Spring out there in the audience and Vanessa Talk. Thank you for being on them watching. We appreciate it. And again, Liam, wish the absolute best with your new school. Woohoo! And you're teaching in new students. That's pretty awesome. Now, I'm going to get you, promise me, Liam. Promise me you'll say something to your students about stroke. You'll teach them about stroke, all that.
No, you're absolutely right. That gives me something to take back to the classroom with me
Right?
tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. I'm playing with it because you can do what you want after it, but I just think I see such a need on there for stroke to be taught to people because maybe it's we at stroke. 'Cause I had the same thing. I had my brain aneurysm and
Mm.
classic warnings. Brain aneurysm was happening, but because a stroke was happening, but because I was educated and I didn't know, I played it off like you did, where everybody just said, "Well, it can't be me." It's like stroke is not gonna happen to me, but it did. But Liam, thank you so much for being right on. Give any last word you want to give us some advice.
Keep a clear vision, keep a vision of what you want to accomplish throughout your recovery, and don't and hold it like this, and don't and make that your prize, and keep moving toward it.
Great advice. Thank you, Liam, for bringing the Stroke of Genius podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
Set me on